Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us on this really special occasion. To the team here at Bushfire Recovery Victoria, I'd like to open this meeting by acknowledging the traditional owners of country throughout Victoria and to pay our respect to them, their culture and their elders, past, present and future. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Carmel Flynn. I'm the Acting CEO of Bushfire Recovery Victoria. Thanks to everyone who's logged on today. It's fantastic to see so much interest. This meeting is being recorded and will be shared publicly after this event. If you don't want to be in the recording, please just switch your cameras off. We also ask that everyone in attendance makes sure your microphone is muted during the presentation, and there will be a question time after each speaker, and your questions are really welcome. So please use the raised hand reaction, or you can write your question in the comments, and we'll do our best to get all the questions, as many questions as time allows. First, just a little bit about Bushfire Recovery Victoria, or BRV. We were established in the wake of the 2019-20 bushfires to work directly with communities, to listen, help and deliver what they need for their recovery. We're really proud to bring you this NAIDOC Week event, which runs alongside the week's theme of Heal Country. This year's theme calls for stronger measures to recognise, protect and maintain all aspects of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture and heritage. This directly reflects BRV's goal to support and empower Aboriginal communities through our commitment to self-determination throughout recovery. Our role at BRV is to support Aboriginal communities in recovery and to guide our organisation to embed Aboriginal self-determination in all of our processes and through all of our outcomes. We understand self-determination is crucial for Aboriginal individuals, families, communities, businesses, and traditional owner groups throughout their recovery journey. BRV's introduction of the Aboriginal culture and healing pillar was the first time in Australia that a dedicated Aboriginal line of recovery was established after a major disaster. It stands alongside traditional recovery pillars of health, economy, natural environment and infrastructure, and supports projects led by Aboriginal community organisations and traditional owner groups that value and respect Aboriginal culture, that address trauma and support healing and promote cultural safety. This pillar structure has helped assist Aboriginal community participation in recovery planning, design, delivery and evaluation, and establishing a stronger Aboriginal voice in government decision-making. One of the ways that this has been achieved is through traditional owner-led projects that support the recovery of cultural heritage. Today, we have the special opportunity to come together to pause, reflect and celebrate what's been achieved in the past 18 months. We thank you for all your work. You're integral to not only recovery, but in paving the way for a new collaborative and authentic approach between Aboriginal communities and government. What you are achieving sets an example not only for Victoria, but Australia-wide. And to begin with, I'd like to share a video featuring Monero, Ewan and Nagario elder from Can River, Auntie Eileen Mongda Blackburn, speaking about Muji Aboriginal Council's work that is incorporating local cultural protocols, values and knowledge into bushfire recovery efforts. Enjoy the event today, everybody, and happy NAIDOC Week. And Dylan, will you please play the video, the first video? Thank you.
The most part of east of the Snowy River, the families in this area, they identify through their bloodline, their connection to that country and the river. That's how we identify. My name's Aileen Monta Blackburn. This country I identify as Monero Ewan, and I do that through my mum and dad's. They've both got different ancestries. Dad's Monero Nagario from here, for his mother, and this is what we call country that belongs to women. We're the gatekeepers. We are a matriarch society, so we have a really important big role in how we care for country. Bushfire recovery has allowed us to speak about our culture in a way that we haven't in the past, and it will allow our kids, our grandkids, and to say, well, this is who we are, and we don't have to we don't have to change who we are to be accepted. The land cannot heal if it doesn't have families out there on country, our people out there, if it doesn't have laughter. The soul of the land's just not going to heal. It may look good, you might replant and re-veg 1,000 plants, but the soul of that country, the dirt, it won't heal. The challenge with these projects has always been to say, hang on, we've been on country for ever and a day, our peoples, and please don't put us into just that little Aboriginal box. Have a bigger conversation, allow us to be part of managing all the land, all the water, because that's what our old people, and that's what we'd love to do. We're really keen, that at the end of these projects or moving forward, that we're inside managing country with them and not sitting on the outside of the burnt fence, I guess. Yeah.
Thanks, Carmel, and thanks, Art, for participating in that video. As always, very powerful stuff. Yama Charles O'Leary, Nenga, Geri Nengi, Gamilari, Wallenbar, Baraba Nengi, Nengabar, Gamilaroi Dewan. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Charles O'Leary, and I'm a proud Gamilaroi man from Barra, New South Wales, and I'm also the Director of the Aboriginal Culture and Healing branch at Bushfire Recovery Victoria. It is a privilege that I'm able to put on and host this event in line with NAIDOC Week. Heal Country is the theme for NAIDOC this year. Beyond the theme of NAIDOC Week, the concept of healing country is embedded in the ethos and the programmatic design of Aboriginal culture and healing pillar. Further, this work, through the commitment of Carmel, our CEO, and our executive more broadly, BRV now begins to expand on how Aboriginal knowledges and systems of thought can be embedded across all lines of recovery. Personally, in considering what it means to heal country, I think that it requires all Australians to raise our collective level of consciousness to understand that country is not inert, rather she breathes, she is imbued with ancient songlines and the continuing care of the first Australians. Country is calling out to all Australians as a means to recalibrate her relationship with us. The question for us is, do we dare listen? We are all very much a part of this very fragile ecosystem, and our separateness causes much harm to the land and to the wellness of all the people that inhabit her lands and waters. I have no doubt that we all flourish when we look after country, as we know that it will also look after you in many more ways that we can yet to understand and comprehend. BRV's vision for Aboriginal Victorians to be at the centre of their individual recovery vision for Aboriginal Victorians is to be at the centre of their individual recovery journeys. This work is happening on the ground in real time, and today we get to hear from some of these organisations that are leading this significant recovery work. Our guest speakers today are Matthew Burns, the CEO of the Tunarong Land and Waters Council, Craig Hocking, the Director of Environmental and Cultural Works at Mudgee Aboriginal Council, East Gippsland, Kathy Thomas and Paula Harrison, the Bushfire Recovery Crew team members from the Gunai Kurnai Land and Waters Aboriginal Corporation. Sincerely, Matt, Craig, Kathy and Paula, I want to take this moment to acknowledge the transformational work that you've been leading and driving Aboriginal community recovery. BRV feel deeply privileged that you continue to work with us in a trusting, in ethical and a reciprocal way that builds BRV's capacity to respond to the needs and aspirations of the communities that we serve, not merely based on what we can deliver. Aboriginal community-led recovery has resulted in resourcing cultural heritage and land management activities that has uncovered over 230 artefacts, establishing new ways of working between government and Aboriginal community organisations, monitoring of totem plants and animals across the fire-affected areas, training and skills development on country to help shape land management practices, and building on community preparedness for future emergency events. To acknowledge and celebrate and promote this work, BRV has worked with these organisations and others to create stories of bushfire recovery, Aboriginal culture and healing. This is a collection of stories behind Aboriginal community-led projects that have been built through resilience and their continued inherent connection to culture and country. We've now added, I think we've added a link to the booklet in the comments sections, and it'll also be added online later. So look, to begin, it is my deep privilege to introduce Matthew Burns, who I said before is the CEO of the Tanarong Land and Waters Council and a Tanarong man, and he's the chair of the Aboriginal Community Recovery and Wellbeing Advisory Group, which is the new name for the Bushfire reference Aboriginal group that we've got that provides oversight and counsel to all of the work that we're doing in Aboriginal communities. So Matt, what I'd like to do now is I'll hand over to you to provide a reflection of the work that you've been doing in this space, perhaps for around 5 minutes or so, and then we'll open the floor to questions. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you. Just had to wait to get the approval to be unmuted. So, hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Matt Burns. As Charles said, I'm a Tanarong man and lucky enough to play a role as CEO of Tanarong Land and Waters Council in progressing, lots of different themes of work and to talk today about some of the support that we've received from BRV in enabling us to progress a number of themes to support the community to engage with country, but also to apply some of the self-determining initiatives and activities that we've been wanting to perform after what has been a significant event, a significant bushfire event. So, firstly, I'll try and keep it all within 5 minutes, Charles. But firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge country myself. I'm coming today from Bunurong country, most recently recognised as Bunurong country in the inner west of Melbourne. And I'd also like to acknowledge, our elders and ancestors. And I do that because I think in a modern context, we play a different role that perhaps some of our ancestors have done through the dispossession, the survival, the activism and stuff that's happened over the years. And now we play a role of a bit more of a subtle advocacy and potentially a little bit of activism, but it's done in a different way because we're moving towards something of a partnership and a relationship with the state to enable stronger relationships and better outcomes for countries. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. I guess the other thing that it's important to note that, traditionally in Western culture, people kind of think about the rights they have to country and on country, and we kind of talk about our rights I have from more of an obligation to the land and how we might care for the land. And there's a difference there that I think is really important, because the rights that we're progressing and wanting to have enshrined, which are inherent rights that we have, aren't necessarily for ownership and control, but more for the care and ensure that we're achieving outcomes not only for our community and country, but also for the betterment of all. I think that's one thing when we're trying to heal country and achieve things on Tanarong lands, we're doing that for the betterment of all. Yeah, this week's NAIDOC theme is Healing Country, which is pretty consistent with a lot of the work that BRV have supported us in. So Tanarung's plays a broad role. We live in a bubble in Aboriginal affairs, and a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of the things that we work across as traditional owners. So Tanarung is what's called a registered Aboriginal party, which provides us with statutory delegation to or be the statutory decision maker for cultural heritage matters on Tanarung country. We also have a settlement agreement which gives us acknowledges our rights to country, and there's lots of different things that we'll do with regard to our rights application of land management. We have park rangers, etc. I think Tanarung has about 50 full-time staff at the moment, and not including some of our casual team and community members that are strongly involved in all the activities that we do for Tanarung country and our community. The support that we received from BRV was around some programs that we wanted to do, which were specifically in two themes. One was cultural heritage matters. There's been a bit of a disconnect between the self-determination and decision-making respect and authority that we receive as a statutory decision maker with regard to cultural heritage. You would think that because you are the decision maker in cultural heritage, you'd be referred to assess and provide guidance and advice on cultural heritage matters. But unfortunately, that's legally we should be, but legally there's a loophole that allows other people to make those determinations for us, and then we're only referred to and other people decide that cultural heritage may be impacted or may be apparent. We're advocating strongly to say that, well, we're the experts and primary knowledge holders on those matters, and we need to be engaged. Through BRV's support, we were able to make that happen. So we were able to get out and identify areas where there was substantial impact and also where there was going to be a lot of cleanup works occur through the effects of bushfire, where we were able to get out proactively and assess these sites to ensure that we weren't inadvertently harming cultural heritage sites, etc. So that support was is still ongoing through the regime of work that we're doing across the affected area on Tanarung country. So that extends through Abiyard, Dandongadale, Mount Buffalo region, the Buffalo River and Buffalo Valley, where the impacts were quite severe. So we've been doing a lot of work with all of the agencies, whether it be Parks Victoria, DELP, or BRV, to collaborate and coordinate the activities that we're doing. And then also there's been another element, which is more engagement for our community to get back out on country in these areas, assess the impact and look at ways that we might be able to heal country through smaller projects of revegetation, we're trying to revitalise and revegetate areas on country that are significant to Tanarung. So we've identified a number of sites on country that have, quite a large cultural significance to us, and playing a role with, I guess, that caring for country element, which is consistent with the NAIDOC theme, to enable not only the young, healthy Tanarung people to get out on country, but elders and others to get together and collaborate, be on country, pass on stories around significance of the area. And, without that support, it was something that we just wouldn't be able to do. So, I guess BRV, great for the support, but also great for the advice that they received through the Aboriginal Reference Group to enable that self-determination and that broad scope of what might be considered healing country and what might be important to both traditional owner groups but community as well, instead of really narrow and tight timeframes, really narrow kind of funding guidelines to say you can only get funding for this project. It was very broad to enable that self-determination and enable each group have the ability to identify what's important to them and what is important for Tanarung, for healing country and playing our important role in cultural heritage. So I guess the thing that I'll finish on is that, I tend to think partnerships are crucial. For me, I'm not necessarily an activist. I'm someone who feels that if I want to move forward for our community, we do that through partnerships and relationships. And BRV have been very willing and open to help enable our involvement in the design and decision-making of certain things, rather than plans, programs being developed without us and then kind of imposed on us, we've had the opportunity to play a role in the design and development, which has been really empowering and a really different approach for BRV or any other state agencies. So I want to thank and congratulate BRV for being open-minded and taking on, advice and guidance and I guess messaging that's been had for many years around the involvement of traditional owners and Aboriginal communities in designing and developing programs, because we know that place-based solutions often are the best solutions, and self-determination is key to that. So thanks again, and I might answer a question later.
Fantastic. Thanks, Matt. And can I just confirm with our moderators there, we're taking questions now, or we've got a session towards the end, just to confirm?
Charles, welcome to take some questions now, if there are any.
Right. All right, we'll open the floor to questions. All right. Well, look, what we might do is that I'm pretty sure there's a large body of work there that Matt has been working on. So I'm pretty sure we're still processing our questions as we go through, and we've got another section, Matt, towards the end of the program today as well. So we can, as we're going through with our other guest speakers, if we can have those questions put into the chat. We can return to that when we towards the end of today's program. So could I just confirm that Craig Hocking has got access? He's here in with us.
Charles, I think we're experiencing a little bit of difficulty there. So I'm wondering if we switch the speakers around for the moment while we try and get Craig in. Thank you.
Happy to do that. So I could just confirm that Kathy and Paula is on the line. We'll give them access to their mics and off we go. Yeah. Well, just while we're setting up for just giving access to Kathy and Paula, I'll just give you guys a bit of a bio of them. So Kathy and Paula are both proud Gunai Kurnai women who love working on country. As part of the bushfire recovery crew with the Gunai Kurnai Land and Waters Aboriginal Corporation, both have taken leadership roles and are demonstrating the importance of connecting community back to country and to culture. Kathy and Paula are working on projects that signify how traditional owners can deliver their own values-based work that can also be recognised by governments as an important aspect to state projects. Kathy and Paula have inspired other women to come and work on country and continue to make themselves, their families, proud of Glawak and all of the work that they do. So, if we could just ask for Kathy and Paula to put their cameras on.
Charles, it's Kate here. You've got a couple of questions in the chat.
Oh, we do? Fantastic. Okay, so what we've got, and what we'll do, Matt, just while we're working on those IT issues, we'll circle back with some of this populated in the chat here. So Kate Miller has asked, Matt, what have been the experiences for young people that have made the biggest difference in recovery?
Look, as I said, resourcing has always been the challenge for us. I mean, as a traditional owner group, often the engagement we get is based on demand for destruction of cultural heritage. That's how cultural heritage works. So the programs that we get are based on that, but they're also they're fixed for the job. So we've never been able to provide, I guess, a longer term security and opportunity to participate over the longer term. And this definitely has enabled that. But probably, one of the things in keeping with the healing country theme is one of the major projects Tanarang doing is a healing knowledge project. We have, the effects of colonisation have been hard on Tanarang. My family and every Tanarang family were forcibly removed from Tanarang lands and were moved to Corranderk on Wurundjeri country. And others then moved to Corranderk and Lake Tyers, but everyone were moved. at one point or another. So the impacts have been hard, and whilst there's a lot of cultural knowledge on country through different family groups, where we've got a project of where we're trying to bring that together to be able to support the next generation. So it's a really specific project which is called the Healing Knowledge Project. That's going to be a long-term program, which could, so we can use our elders and knowledge holders to bring in cultural knowledge, family group knowledge, songline knowledge, bush foods, other elements of country, all this knowledge together, so we can create this really strong baseline knowledge for our community and the next generation to ensure that we're retaining what is, the oldest living culture in the world. We're making sure that we keep that alive for the next generation, but also for the broader community. As I say, I think it's so important for the work that we're wanting to do and the role that we're wanting to play on country in years to come. We need the broader community to understand our goals and objectives and be supportive of what we're trying to achieve. And I think that there is an aversion out there sometimes with people that don't know traditional owners and the role that we play, that they think we're trying to take something, or we're trying to potentially create difficulty for people. But when we see as traditional owners that we're wanting to have, those rights that I mentioned before, enshrined and recognised, but also to play a role in healing country. But to do that, we need our elders and knowledge holders to come together to support us with that Healing Knowledge Project. And we're doing that out on country, even at a small scale, through this BRV project, where we're getting knowledge holders and elders together with our youth, and that's something that doesn't always happen. So we've got a lot of young Tanarung people are really keen to learn, and the ability not to just be contracted to do some work where there's no elders and that around to provide guidance and support, but to be able to have this program where we have elders and knowledge holders out as well with with the young fellas and young kids to support them with their journey. It's something that's really powerful and really exciting. So, I mean, that's probably what's been the most important thing, the ability to bring elders and knowledge holders together with the youth.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Look, we've got another question that's come through from Megan Stifler, and just around for context for other community members that have joined us. BRV has actually also just recently been activated to be supporting communities to support for longer term recovery with the recent the flood and storm event that that Victoria has experienced. What, from your understanding, has been the extent or the impact on Aboriginal communities in your patch?
Look, again, the effects of colonisation, as I said, meant that Tanarung people are all forcibly removed. So, I mean, my nana grew up in Healesville, and a lot of my family, my direct family, lived in Healesville and then moved away. And a lot of Tanarung people, after Corranderk was shut down, moved into Healesville and other parts of southern Victoria. So it meant that it really isn't a strong sense of community on Tanarung country, and we're on a journey right now as Tanarung Land and Waters Council to try and get Tanarung mob back home on country. So we've probably got about 25 Tanarung people that live on country, I'd say, right now, and probably 3 years ago we had 4. So we're on a good journey, and Tanarung, we have a number of community benefit programs, and one of them is a Bringing the Mob Home program, where we'll pay $7,500 each year for 3 years to support rent, mortgage payments, bond or other things to enable people to come back to country. Or we can put that full $22,500 together to support Tanarung people who may want to buy and to go towards a deposit to support Tanarung mob to come back home to country, to be able to create that community. So when I look at the impacts, I wouldn't say it's on community as such, rather than individuals of Tanarung people have been impacted. My mum lives in Alexandra on Tanarung country, and there has been effects because of the storms, but our role is more through the recognised land rights that I referred to before that we have in all Crown lands. So we hold a land use agreement, which means that state agencies have to engage us when they're proposing to do works on Crown lands. And we're working strongly with DELP and Parks Victoria around the impacts of, a lot of them is hazardous tree removal or just hazardous trees from the storms that they're worried about that are going to fall on infrastructure like roads and other ways which are, dangerous for public safety. So working through not only the cultural heritage aspect from that, but also the inherent rights and caring for country obligations that we have as well. So we're involved in that, and the impact has been significant. But from a Tanarang perspective, and I know that other parts of the country were impacted a lot more, we're on the other side of the Great Dividing Range, and it was never, while there were impacts, they weren't as severe as on the south side of the Great Divide.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And we've got a comment from Justine Phelan here where she says, traditional owners are trying to give knowledge to help heal country, and she feels so deeply privileged to be a part of the team at BRV who are championing this work. Look, we are still just looking around with some access issues for our other guests that are joining us today. But Matt, I guess, and then I'll open the floor for other questions for our guests that are with us today. But just, reflecting around with the leadership role and that pre-planning. So we've got Craig that's has got through now, Matt. So I'll hold that question and I'll bring that back to you in the end. So welcome, Craig. I could see Craig's got access now. So look, just as an introduction to Craig has over 15 years of stakeholder and community engagement with government, non-for-profit and the private sector, which includes Aboriginal health, training, human resources management, environmental and cultural programs. And he is also the chief executive, has been the chief executive officer at Tamworth Aboriginal Medical Service, back on God's country. I'm from that way as well. And he currently holds the role of Director of Environmental and Cultural Works at Mudgee Aboriginal Council, East Gippsland. So welcome, brother. And if you just wanted to share a bit about your role and the current work that you're working on, that would be great. And we'll follow through with questions that will follow as well. So welcome.
Thanks, Charles. First, I'd just like to acknowledge traditional owners of the land that I sit on today, and my elders past and present. I've just had somebody walking behind me and throw me right off track. Currently, I'm the Director of Environmental and Cultural Works at Mudgee Aboriginal Council in Orbost. We've got a lot of contracts with Parks Victoria, DELP, East Gippsland Catchment Management Authority, especially after the fires, with the regeneration and environmental works of putting stuff back into the environment that's been damaged there. That's through our own nursery that we've got on site at a new property we've purchased in November last year. And we're about 15,000 plants we currently have propagating out there at the property, with a lot more to actually that are currently in seed. We've got other projects. We're working with DELP through a brown tree frog program at the moment, putting habitats back into the forest after they were damaged by the fires. So I've got crews out doing that at the moment. I have crews working with Parks around feral pig control on the footprint of the fire, and currently working with DELP around future projects around feral pig control on the footprint of the fire. That's going to be in partnership with Tanarang, and I see Matt there as well, and Glawak. So that's going to be a really good program, because we're going to be sharing our knowledge around those sort of works, and we can learn from each other, because we've all got different levels of experience, and that's an opportunity for different mobs to work together and actually and work together on country and repair some of that country that's been damaged. I'll probably leave it at that. I think I've spoken enough, and gives everybody an opportunity to ask questions too if they want.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Craig. So we'll just open the floor for questions for Craig.
None, that's even better.
Not that easy, Craig. It's Kate Miller here. In terms of that idea of being sort of prepared and organised for when these disruptions happen, and for you as an organisation, how have you found that? I know when we get to recovery, it's all a little bit of a scramble, to get programs up and running. In terms of that idea of being, sort of organised and supported, that overall cycle of healing country, and these events will happen and maybe increasingly so. Can you talk a bit about what that means for Mudgee and how you're thinking maybe a bit more in the long term?
So I actually got asked this question yesterday because we're currently doing an afterburn documentary and with Uncle Richard Franklin. And but as far as being prepared for future events, yes, we can have mitigation things in place. You know, we learned a lot from the 2009 fires in Victoria, but these fires are different. The next event may be different again. You can prepare to a certain extent, but you can't fully prepare for something you don't know what the event's going to look like. We can have mitigation strategies in place, and you know, we've currently got funding grants in around putting property protection in to actually protect our assets. So when and if another event does happen, we don't have to go through that rebuilding phase, and we can start that regeneration and recovery works a lot quicker. I think the mitigation part of it's the big thing, because if you have to rebuild from nothing, obviously your recovery takes longer, especially in the environmental side where we've got our nursery and that. If we lost all of that, we'd be only just probably getting back to a stage now where we're starting to be able to, you know, take those plants that are a mature age and put back in the environment where, you know, we've been placing back into the environment for quite some time because our assets weren't damaged. But where our new property is you know, there's an overlay there of fire. So, you know, to put that mitigation in, and I think, you know, anybody that's looking at, you know, potential new events or future events, you know, mitigation's probably the best way of protection.
Thanks, Craig. We've got a question that's come in from Cameron Miller. I've seen through reading the Healing for Country program some training of traditional owners around new and emerging scientific technologies, for example, remote camera trapping and call playback, etc. What is your view about the learning pathways in both directions for both traditional owners and scientists that predominantly work for government agencies? Do you see it as sharing knowledge both ways? And if I could extend that question both to Craig and Matt as well, please.
Yeah, look, we've got a current opportunity at the moment through DELP around the sharing of knowledge. They're actually doing some surveys of some forest coops, and they want to learn from us. So they want us to come out so they can learn cultural stuff from us and be really aware of the country that they're actually going on to, so as to not cause any issues. So, but we're going out, we're learning about the environment, because the people that are doing these surveys are botanists and zoologists. So we're actually collecting that knowledge that they can give us as well, so we can actually take that back and then use that as part of our, you know, normal everyday work, because we are out there every day. We see the environment, you know, and the extra knowledge that we can have can actually benefit us in collecting some of that data, so we can then pass it on. You know, we do have camera surveillance out in the bush regularly. We've got cameras up there now that, you know, we've been up there for over 2 months now. And, you know, we'll go out and we'll collect that data and feed that data back to parks and DELP around what we've seen in the bush and what animals and that are coming back after, you know, the fire event. Now we've found some small marsupials just here close to Orbost where, you know, they didn't know whether they still existed anymore, but we've actually got them on camera. You know, they're funny little critters, but yeah. But we've also caught wild dogs and cats in some of the burnt area, and that's a threat to that environment as well, because those little marsupials that are there are under threat now, not just from the fire event that's previous, but now the feral animals that are out there, like the cats.
And Matt? All right, that's all right. just with your thoughts. But anyway, we've got
It's all right. I was just waiting for the unmute to happen there, Charles. So I'm unmuted now. Yeah, look, so like, yeah, I was just thinking about what Craig was talking about before, and with regard to the after effects and what do we need to do. Look, I'd suggest the approach that we're advocating for which is what BRV have done, is that partnership approach. Where everyone during the fires and after the fires thought that cultural fire might be the saviour to everything, and it definitely won't be. But it is a management tool that over generations, if implemented appropriately, can enable more appropriate management of country. But it's not necessarily a wildfire mitigation process, but it does have that effect. But if fire itself gets into a canopy, then it doesn't matter if the forest floor is necessarily maintained appropriately, but it does mitigate those things. But it also provides healthy country as well. So, look, it's an interesting one with the professional development stuff, because yeah, absolutely, we that shared knowledge, shared understanding, and that ability to share and learn is important. But it's also, there are elements of knowledge, of traditional owner knowledge, when you have 200 years of people not wanting to give a stuff about Aboriginal culture and cultural practices, and now all of a sudden it's like, well, can you tell me everything, because we want that knowledge now and we want to apply it. So whilst there is genuine want to partner and develop relationships, there is also elements of knowledge, especially with some cultural practices, that traditional owners want to be the decision makers for in the future and take the lead for, rather than just hand over knowledge and then be left not playing a role in the management of country as well. So that's always a challenge in the competing interest, where we're trying to support community and build that self-determination, but also need to be on that journey of capacity building to be in that place in the future to be able to take on the decision-making function. From a Tanarang perspective, we've got lots of members, but I don't think we'll ever have enough members to play every single role and function on Tanarang country. So, where do we want to place ourselves, on the ground or making decisions? So we need to be maybe making decisions, but also, enabling Tanarang people who want to be working on country to be able to do that as well. So that's just the work and the plan that we're working on. Yeah, look, as I said, the training and stuff's really, really important. We similar to what Craig was talking about, you have your ecologists and others that, can go out and do work, but it's not helpful unless there's that kind of element of training and development that can come with that. So, we have similar things with the cameras, with the long-footed potoroo in our region, where we do that for the monitoring for the potoroo. I saw on TV recently Zoos Victoria talking about the great stuff they do with the mountain pygmy possum on Tanarang country. Actually, Tanarang are the ones that hold the contract to do all the monitoring and habitat management and all that kind of stuff. For the mountain pygmy possum, we're the ones that capture the bogong moth and feed the pygmy possum in Mount Sterling and Mount Buller, and Zoos Victoria take the credit for it. So we do these programs at the moment, and look, that's on us. We need to kind of market ourselves probably a bit better as well. But we are involved in these programs, and we can't be involved in those programs without the support that we get from others who are willing to support us to take on those roles and responsibilities, which is really important. So professional development is key. And I just saw another question about maps on a line with regard to traditional country. Yeah, look, a map on a line is not consistent with song lines and relationships with communities. So I can speak for, and I know Paula and that are here, so excuse me, but with the Alpine National Park on Tanarang country and Gunai-Kurnai country, whilst we have a line which goes through the Great Dividing Range, we have an agreement where we work both sides of the Great Divide together in partnership. So when there's works that need to be happening in the Alpine area, that Tanarang have a shared country arrangement. So we'll do things together, and we have a number of relationships like that in the west of Tanarang country with Jar Jararang on the Campaspe River, where whilst the line is the river, we collaborate and work together. So, where possible and where relationships are strong, which we definitely have with our Gunai-Kurnai neighbours and Jar Jararang, it enables good partnership and shared learning even between traditional owner groups. And as Craig says, it's really exciting to get together with different mobs across the area to share knowledge, which only only helps us all, because every group have different perspective and different knowledge that helps us all.
Thanks for that. Thanks, Matt and Craig, for your considered responses there. Look, we've just had a bit of a shift in the program, and we're quite privileged today to actually have Daniel Miller, which is the General Manager of the On Country programs, and does a hell of a lot more than that as well for the, from GLOWAC. So welcome, Daniel. If you wanted to turn your screens on and put your mic on, that'd be great. Just a bit of background about to your role and about some of the bushfire recovery work you're doing, which will then be followed by questions. So welcome, Daniel.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. I'm just checking you can hear me and see me. I think,
yep.
Is that right? Yep. No worries. Yeah, well, thanks to say you're privileged. That's a nice thing to say. Look, I enjoyed. Sorry, I came on a bit late, and hopefully Paula and Kath will come on at some point. So I'm the General Manager on Country with the Gunai Kurnai Land and Waters Aboriginal Corporation, and we've, similar to Craig's mob and Matt's mob, we've been doing this work for some time. So I don't want to re-say stuff that's been said, because a lot of really good stuff's been talked about, and we've talked about it at a mob level, and working, like Matt said, working really well to do stuff together, and to support each other, and to share strengths and opportunities. So that was really good. So those blokes have done a great job talking about that. Sitting here, I was thinking about the things that I can add to that, and the way that we've approached it this year, while similar to everything that's been said, I've sort of trying to recognise Matt talked about capacity and things like that. So we straight away found a number of staff who are keen and interested and able to do some work on country, and we put them and as we all know, healing country and is one and the same as healing people. So we had a couple of focus areas. One was to get as many people on country doing something meaningful as we could, and as often as we can. So that, I think, we've been able to achieve that really well, and there's been some people who've, I think we've changed lives in some ways by sort of helping that to happen, and then they're sort of connecting community through their projects. Really wanted to start to connect the science and the feeling of healing country together with this, and the opportunity was there to have a crack at that, and I reckon we've probably done all right. And what we did was we got a bit of help to design what we're just calling a survey tool, and it was initially, we identified values-based priorities, say. So some people community members might have a place, or a species priority, or really anything. So that values is what created our priorities, and our survey tool allowed our staff and then community members who were part of it to do a survey technique that provided some meaningful data without one having to be a scientist and needing a whole stack of things under your belt to understand it, and two, it's stuff that we can keep and build upon, and then like Craig talked about, mitigation techniques, and use it as part of our exercise of reintroducing fire into country that's been burnt or country that hasn't been burnt. So this tool is something we continue to use, continue to build up data, and but data that we can keep and use and share with our communities, but also share with our partners. So if any of our state partners wanted to be a part of something, and we're happy to to share some of that information, because it does have some sort of level of scientific rigor. So we're quite proud of that, and I'm quite proud of the rollout, and the team have really taken to it. And if that's a step to building some personal goals for someone to study further and get more involved in an element of managing country, then that's brilliant. And Matt talked about partnerships before, and and like Matt, they're critically important to us. And I think, traditional owner mobs that do well by, by utilising partnerships effectively. And so each of the people on here in some way, shape or form would be a partner to us. So having our people get involved in activities that might not necessarily be a highest priority, but there's an element of connectivity, I suppose. So building that relationship and allowing some of our guys and girls to get involved at a level that suits them, is accepted by all, and can be built on. And then the last thing I'll just talk about is just sort of sharing the journey. That's I think it's really important in any of these projects that we factor in a really strong comms element to it, so that internally and externally we're identifying the challenges, and issues, and sharing the success, and so I think that's probably the strongest way to have everyone prepared and be ready for the next event. Because let's face it, they're going to keep happening. We had a flood event only a couple of months ago, and we can sort of roll out the same process that we developed through, in response to the 1920 bushfires, to deal with a flood event if we needed to. And in this instance, we didn't think we needed to, but it was all there ready to go. So that's sort of capacity and to respond, I guess. If I say any more, I feel like I'll probably just be repeating what the other men have said. So I'm happy to just leave it there, Charles, unless anyone wanted to.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for that, mate. Look, and I'm also very conscious of time, but I think what we've got here is just one last question that we've got for the panel, because we will have to promptly close at 1 o'clock. And I think it really is a pertinent question as well, which would get a response, perhaps around a minute each from you, since we've got about 5 minutes left here around with it. But Sally's put in the question section here around with it. So for the panel, from the most recent learnings from this bushfire recovery process, what is your key request that future emergency planning need to accommodate for preparedness, response and recovery approaches? So if we were to escalate to give some advice up to emergency management more broadly, what would that advice be? And we'll start with you, Daniel, then Matt, and we'll finish with Craig.
Yep. No worries. Thanks, Charles. Look, the one thing I think for us is we need to embed into the emergency management process and procedures and standing orders and things to get in touch straight away early. And GLOWAC has the capacity, for example, to get involved at a large IMT level, and we wouldn't resource 24/7, but we can actively resource some cultural heritage advice, for example. Too often we're coming in too late and we're playing catch up, and it's not good enough, and it relies too much currently on relationships. So if there's a local incident controller who knows me or something, they'll give me a ring. But really, it should be part of the rules for every incident that they get in touch with any recognised traditional owner groups. Thanks, Charles.
Thanks, Daniel. Matthew. Matthew, speak. Moderator, please. Yeah.
There we go. I will be repeating Dan a little bit there, but yeah, the code of fire practice is something that there's been a long kind of process of traditional owners saying we need to play a role in influencing the code of fire. I think the commissioner about 10 or so years ago said, yeah, that's a great idea, and nothing's ever been done necessarily about it. As Dan said, we have the same experience in Tunaran country where the relationships are strong, where we're welcome into the ICCs to provide incident control centres, to provide advice and guidance when it comes to cultural heritage matters, and where the relationship's strong, there's been fantastic response to that advice. In other ICCs where we don't have strong relationships, we've tried to be involved and offered support, and they say, no, we're right, we've got it under control. you know, we've got our own cultural heritage team internally that isn't the traditional owners. So it's around that process, and embedding that in process is really important when it comes to the emergency element. But then obviously, as mentioned before, the fundamental management of country and the introduction of cultural fire is something that, as I said, isn't a solution for now or in 5 years' time. It's a solution if we actually start implementing it now, and generationally can start managing country in a different way, is where we want to start the journey and move forward.
Thanks, Matt. Craig, 1 minute.
Is that all? No, look, I just want to echo the sentiments of both Matt and Daniel. Like, you know, communication's, I suppose, the big key behind all of this. You know, that was obvious to me, especially. I was in the incident control centres in Bairnsdale and Orbost during the event as a MLO for the Department of DHHS at the time. You know, I spent time in there, and the communication needs to be a little bit more fluent between, you know, traditional owners and the ICCs. But not only that, the communication pre any event. You know, we need to be a part of the planning stage. You know, we need to be there at the forefront of this. You know, and I see Anthony on the screen for East Gippsland Shire. You know, we've had discussions with them post the event, and we'll continue those discussions at a East Gippsland level with the council. You know, that's a key relationship that needs to be cemented within planning for the future. You know, it's not if, but it's when we have more events, because they are inevitable. They are going to be in there on land and on country, and we need to be there as part of that planning process.
Man, thank you very much for your time, your counsel and your advice that you provide to BRV, and we look forward to continuing to working with you. I encourage all of our guests to, now that we have actually shared our booklet around our stories of Aboriginal culture and healing, to take the time to read. And again, if anyone wants to do some follow-up and have other conversations with us, my contact details will be in the chat. So thank you very much. Happy NAIDOC week, and have a deadly Friday, everybody. Cheers.
Thanks so much, Charles. And thanks everyone for joining.